Welcome back guys to a brand new episode of Mastering Programming. In today's episode we'll be talking about SwiftUI, the new declarative syntax by Apple. In this episode we'll be talking about declaring text, buttons, views and so on. So this is just a very basic tutorial, and if you're someone who's just about to start with SwiftUI, then this video was made just for you. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Mastering Programming. Now, like I said, this episode will be a very quick and easy but very beneficial episode for someone who's just about to start with SwiftUI. So, in order to make sure that you are actually going to be able to follow along, just make sure that you're on the correct version of Xcode. So, currently I'm using 11.2. You can be on Xcode 11 or Xcode 11.1 as much as you're higher than Xcode 10. And also make sure that you're on macOS Catalina. Now, in order to open the canvas, all you need to do is click on that button and click on canvas, and that will allow you to see a preview kind of thing of everything you're actually typing right now. So let's go ahead and maybe type in 2 extra L's, and you realize that straight away the 3 L's get added right here. So I'm just going to remove that and make sure that it's correct. Now, I just want you to notice something. Right now, this is a text. So this is what's being displayed right here. If you select on this, if you select it or click on it, the code for it is going to be highlighted. Now, in order to change the font, colors, and so on of an object, there is actually 3 ways you can do this. You can go to the code underneath it and type in dot font, for example, if you're trying to change the font, and then you name or you give the name of the font you want. So in our case, I want large title. And you can see SwiftUI is actually pretty quick, and it auto completes it. And you can see that it also changed straight away on the right side on the canvas. Let's go ahead and also add in some colors. So I'm gonna give it a color, and I'm going to say, oh sorry, in order to give a color, you need something called foreground color. And I want a color of red. And there we go. We have it changed straight away. Pretty cool. Now you can actually apply this for anything. So you can add fonts, you can add how bold it is, you can add so many things, and I'll get to that in just a second. But before that, let me show you how we can also modify text in a different way. So let's go ahead and remove this. And I want you to click on text, and you realize that a menu opens right here. In order to get this menu, if your Xcode looks something like this, you just navigate to this button, press on it, and it will come up. And you click on that like pin right here. This shows you the attributes inspector. Inside of here, you can actually change the text. So we can put an extra D and press enter, and you realize an extra D is added. Or you can also do all this stuff that I was doing here. So we can go ahead and add in a font. We can add in a weight, color, why not? And you realize that as we're changing this, A, the actual text on the canvas is being updated, and B, we have the actual code generated for us. And this is a very useful tool because it actually allows you to understand how how Swift does things. It's not just you selecting some colors and some fonts. You actually get a first-hand experience on how the things get added. Now, just a note, if something ever looks funny in the canvas and you feel like your code is correct, my advice is run the simulator or run this on your phone and make sure that it's correct. Right now, Apple has said that the canvas might be incorrect sometimes, and your code is always the more trustworthy source or the more thing that you want to get back to. Now, let's remove all the things we did and discuss the last way you can add modifiers such as font and color. So I want you to click on the plus button, and you're going to realize you should probably open something like here. And I'll get to this page in a second, but right now I want you to move to this sort of like 3 lines on top of each other. And you realize that there's heaps of things here like colors, touch bar, item, accent, all these things that might not make sense that right now, but these are actually modifiers. So let's go ahead and add a font. And you realize it looks exactly the same as when we typed it or when we added it that way. And I'm simply going to say dot large title. And you can realize that it straight away changes. You can do the same thing for colors and all the things we did, but I'm just not going to get into that because you kind of like already get the point. So these are 3 ways where you can add things. Personally, my favorite way is through code. It's the fastest, it's the safest, and I just feel much cooler doing it that way. Let's go ahead and actually try add another object. For now, let's just add a text. Let's say, let's first change this because I really hate it when people just have hello world. So I'm just gonna say, hey there. Now let's say we wanted to add another object. Let's go ahead and say text, and I'm going to say, hi, how are you? Now, if we press try again, notice how we get an error and our stuff is no longer being displayed on the canvas. Now, don't worry, you didn't do a major issue here, you don't have a major issue, but how SwiftUI works is it sees whatever object you declared here and it throws it in all of the canvas. So right now, text is actually acquiring all of your screen, but we don't want that. We want to be able to add more objects. So all I'm going to do is first remove this, and I'm going to click on command followed by a left click, and you realize that we get this really useful menu right here. Inside that menu, we get the option to embed in HStack, which allows us to put objects next to each other horizontally, or embed in something called a VStack, which allows us to actually embed or create objects vertically like that. For this tutorial, or for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and say embed in VStack. After I do that, you can actually go ahead and say text. And inside of here, we can say, hi, how are you? Just like we tried to do earlier. And you realize that now we don't actually have any issues with declaring or creating two objects on top of each other. Now, let's say we wanted to make the top text large title and that one large title, but the first one we want it to be red, while this one we want it to be blue. We can do this by simply coming here and say we can say dot font, and we can say dot large, or you can do it from here or from there, just like I told you. And let's go ahead and copy this because we want the other one to look exactly the same. And you realize that both of them now are actually large. We can also add a color just like we did earlier by giving a full color. And I'm going to say color dot red, dot red. And I'm going to copy this and I'm going to say color dot blue. Now, I just want you to notice something. Notice how we have the same font, but different colors. Instead of having this crammed like right here, if something is going to be the same, we can simply, let's just remove it from here, and let's remove it from here as well. But now it's small. We can simply come to the VStack and we can say dot font, and we can say dot large title. And you realize that this applies to everything inside of that bracket. So everything from this bracket to that bracket will now have this modifier apply to it, which means anything we add inside the VStack, it's going to, any sort of text inside the VStack is actually going to carry the same font. So this is just a quick way of you actually customizing your objects. Now, I just want to explain something. So let's say we have more modifiers here. Let's say we have bold, or let's say we have background of color dot blue, for example. I'm just adding random stuff. Let's say we have all this stuff. How does Swift actually understand that we're adding a modifier and not just another text? Well, if you notice, all our modifiers had a dot before them. And that means that it will be a modifier. Swift will realize that it's a modifier. Regardless of how far or how close you declare two objects next to each other, if there's a dot under the object, that's a modifier and it's not an object. Let's go ahead and actually remove all of this. And now I'm going to show you how to add a button. Personally, my favorite way of adding things, if it's just a text, maybe yeah, type it. But the safest way to add a button, like just specifically buttons, is through here. So we're going to navigate to this item right here. And if we type in button, you'll notice that we get a couple of button options here. But let's go ahead and remove this just for explanation purposes and realize how we get this whole bunch of things. We can have buttons. Actually, let's go ahead to the list. Buttons, date pickers, edit buttons, forms, all these things you can use. You can it's actually very useful to use them straight away, and they're very easy to customize. For now, I just want to show you how you can actually use a button. So go ahead and add a button right here, and you realize it's so small. We can add some text inside. So let's go ahead and say press me, and you realize it's formed. And of course, if we want to add customization to the button, we're not going to add it here. We're actually going to add it to the text because that's what's appearing in front of us. So I'm going to go ahead and again say large. Oh, sorry, I always forget. And I'm going to say font. I'm going to say large title. And you realize that it's getting bigger. Let's say we actually want this to look more like a button. I'm going to go ahead and say that frame. And this is how I add a frame. I'm going to say 300, 300, and I'm going to align this at the center. And now we have a frame for it, but it's not appearing because it's white. So how do we give it a background color? All we need to do is simply put a dot, and then we can say background, and we're going to say color dot. Let's give this a red one. And you realize that we have this thing right here. Now, see this play button here? Right now, if you try to press on this, nothing will happen because this is just an image. Now, if you actually go ahead and press on this play button, and once the preview loads, you can actually interact with this canvas and actually press on the button. And it's actually pretty cool because it means you don't have to load the simulator. This fully works with everything. If you have a scroll view, you can actually scroll. If you have a keyboard, you can type all of that in the canvas. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. And now you might wonder, well, David, how do we actually add some action? So see how there's a bracket right here and it says action. You know, Apple couldn't make this more simple. I'm simply just going to press enter to give me some space. And all I'm going to do for now is simply just say, hey, I have been pressed. So let's go ahead and actually run this again. And I'm not sure if this will work on the simulator. Okay, so it might not work in the simulator, but this action is being pressed right now. So if we have like our console running and you press on this, it will actually print out, hey, I have been pressed. I'm gonna pause this. And now I wanna show you how you can add images to the button. So we have a text, but let's say we wanted to add an image to the button rather than just having a text. Now I'm going to remove this like that, and I'm going to say image, just like this. And nothing's gonna happen right now, and Swift is actually gonna give you an error, and that's because we need to pass the name of our image. Now I have downloaded the SF symbols from Apple, so I'm just gonna open it up, and it came to my second screen. So let me just move like that. And let's say you wanted to put the trash on it. What you're going to say is system, image, I'm going to say system, and inside of here, let's type in trash. And you realize that the image trash is actually displayed right now. Now, obviously, you might want it to look bigger. So all you need to do is simply, and you can add this exactly the same way you added it to the words or the text, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and say font. I'm going to say large title. And all of a sudden it got added. Or you can say resize and then you can add it. So you can apply all the modifiers on the text on the actual image as well. So let's go ahead and actually give this trash can a color of black. I'm going to say color dot black. This might be a bad idea. But yeah, there we go. It's not too much of a bad idea. And you can actually press on this image straight away and it will work. So that's how you can add an image to a button. Now you might wonder, all right, well, David, that's pretty cool, but how do I now add things next to each other? So let's say we have a button here. Oh, actually, sorry. How do I add text underneath that image? Well, let's go ahead and actually say text. And we're going to say trash. Now, notice how this got printed or got written underneath the trash can. Now, this is actually part of the button, and if you press on it like this or like that, it gets pressed on. but we want it to be underneath the image. So we're actually going to embed this in a VStack. Embed in a VStack. I'm going to cut this and I'm going to put it on side. And now notice how all of a sudden it's underneath the trash can. Now I just want to make sure you know something. So you can actually drag and drop things in on the canvas as well. So let's say we wanted to have, let's just go with a toggle. Can go ahead and actually add it inside of the VStack. So it's not letting me. Well, sometimes you can. uh, you should be able to, but I think because everything is just cramped for the moment. But let's, for example, add a button inside of here. What the hell is that? Sorry. We can add a button just right here. There we go. Whew, that was stressful. And you can, of course, customize it and just change it the exact same way you want here. Now, if you want things to be right next to each other, so if you wanted this button to be next to that button, all you need to do is embed the whole view in a H stack. So let me actually show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and embed this whole V stack inside a H stack, like this. And inside of here, I'm going to actually copy this whole, actually let's find out where this ends. I'm going to copy this whole thing and I'm going to put it inside of here. Now you realize that there's actually two trash cans right next to each other. Now you might be wondering, well, let's say I wanted to increase the distance between the two, how do I do that? All you need to do is simply either click on the padding right here, like this. This makes it closer, this makes it further, or you can actually just type the padding just right here and you can let it know exactly what kind of padding you want between the two. So wherever the padding is, it's gonna separate the two objects from each other, or you can type the padding where the view ends. So just for the whole thing, you can add the padding. So let's go ahead and actually type in dot padding. And you realize that the padding now applies to all of them, and we can put numbers inside of here and it will affect every view inside of that H stack. So this was actually it for this episode, for this very basic tutorial on how to declare things, how to play around with everything. I'll be linking where to find the SF symbols download file from Apple, and I'll hopefully continue with this SwiftUI development later on and give you more tutorials on that. Thank you for watching. Make sure you give it a like and a subscribe, and have a good day.